This is a lecture on Chapter 2, Part 1. We'll break Chapter 2 into 3 parts. This one being on cultural and interpersonal communication. A lot of what we're talking about in this chapter is what's called intercultural communication. Now remember, interpersonal communication is just communication between individuals. So whenever we're communicating across cultures, we have interpersonal and intercultural communication occurring at the same time. Culture is defined as the relatively specialized lifestyle of a group of people that is passed on from one generation to the next through communication, not through genes. This is the definition provided from your text, and depending on the textbook you read, you'll see similar definitions that may vary slightly. You can see all the different factors that this will influence: values, beliefs, and so on. These are all the major things that we do on a daily basis. Culture influences all of these, but also how we behave, how we react to things, how we interact with other people. These are all going to typically be a reflection of the culture that we were raised in. Contrary to what some will say or what some believe, culture is not the same thing as race. Culture is something that is learned. It's not something that is innate. Innate meaning something that you're born with. We are born with a certain race. It's biological or physical in nature. Culture is something that we learn as we grow. Part of what makes up culture in any culture, we have what are called subcultures or co-cultures. We will get into that in one of the other lectures. But one of those things is sex and gender. Biological sex is determined by genes, by biology. You are male or you are female. That is biological sex. Gender, on the other hand, is something that is socially constructed. How someone of a certain sex should behave. So gender identity has become a major topic, and you see the term cisgender or transgender. You can see the definitions of those within your text. The way we are supposed to act is something that we learn from our culture as well. Cultural awareness is something that we all need to work on. Of course, we know that not all cultures are the same, but that doesn't always impact how we view other cultures or how aware we are of them. It's important for us to be aware of different cultures and how to interact with them because demographics in our society are constantly changing. This section talks about, specifically as an example, interracial couples becoming more common. Intercultural couples, I'm sure, are also becoming more common. And the spread was anywhere from 1970, I believe it was 1% of couples were interracial, and today it was a much higher percentage. They also talked about the fact that culturally diverse workforces are becoming more valued because the more intercultural your workforce is, the more people that your workforce can relate to, the stronger your client base might become as a result of that. We're also being taught culturally to be sensitive to cultural differences. For a long time, and in many cultures, cultural assimilation was the standard. Cultural assimilation meaning that when someone from one culture moves to another culture, they should adapt their own behavior to that of those in their new home. And so they should drop their own culture and assimilate the culture that they are now living in. Today we are becoming more and more open to the idea that we should maintain our own cultural norms when we move to a new culture. And that's becoming far more acceptable. Coexistence is now much more of a standard goal than cultural assimilation. There are also factors that play into this cultural awareness of economic and political interdependence. We've become a more globalized society, meaning that we have many businesses that rely on overseas partners or overseas vendors. Intercultural communication is very important there, and thus interpersonal communication across those cultural lines. We must be able to communicate with members of other cultures in order to help maintain economic stability. The U.S. relies heavily on Canada and heavily on Mexico for our economic stability, but also heavily on many European nations, Asian nations, and so on. And we have to be able to communicate well across those lines. The same thing goes for politics. Because the politics of another nation impact the politics of the U.S., they impact our national security as well as economic security. And so it's important for us to learn those skills of interpersonal and intercultural communication. A good thing about technology is that it makes it easy, or at least easier, to communicate with people all around the world. You can send an email to someone in Japan, and it takes just as long as it took for you to send an email to someone in the next block over. Technology makes international communication easier, intercultural communication. However, that does not impact as readily our ability to adapt our own culture. So we still need to work on cultural sensitivity and cultural awareness when we're communicating using technology, just like we would face to face. Things like social networking sites help us to understand other cultures a little bit better by observation. We see how other cultures might communicate with each other. Social networking and media help with that. Within cultures, there are culture-specific types of communication that we have. That may be a change in eye contact and what it means from culture to culture, or greetings. These cultures and norms vary from culture to culture. These behaviors and norms vary from culture to culture. A greeting in one culture may be very effective and ineffective in another. For example, there are many cultures that when they're meeting someone for the first time, they may embrace or even give a kiss on the cheek. And that's normal in their culture. However, in a place like the US, if you try to greet someone with an embrace and a kiss on the cheek the first time you've met them, that would be considered too forward and problematic. Very uncomfortable at the very least. It's ineffective as a manner of greeting in U.S. culture. So we come to the question of how do we learn cultures? You see the term enculturation here. This is the process of learning the culture that you're born into. And that's simply from observation, moving down to ethnic identity. We acquire our ethnic identity, how we identify with our culture, based on what we see growing up. So this observation, family, friends, the people that we interact with, what's important to us as a family or in my group of friends. It's the commitment to the beliefs and philosophy of your own culture. Now again, this is not the same as race. Remember, race is physical or biological in nature and has very little, if anything, to do with culture. This last major term here that you see is called acculturation. Acculturation is learning the rules and norms of a culture that's different from the one that you were born into. So you may have been raised in the United States, but you decide that you want to live in South Africa. So you move from the United States to South Africa. You can't continue living as if you were still in American culture. You have to adopt another culture, South African culture. And whenever we do this, when we learn the rules and norms of that new culture, that's called acculturation. So your own native cultures are adapted to host cultures, the host being the place that you live now. And to an extent, you will adapt the host cultures to suit your own. This is just a part of normal communication for us to adapt things and meet somewhere in the middle. So things to remember here is that culture influences the way that we communicate, interpersonally, and really in any facet of communication. We don't have to accept all cultural practices of either your own culture that you were born and raised in, or a host culture. To be a member of American culture, for instance, you don't have to believe and practice everything that is acceptable in American culture. However, you are used to it, you're accustomed to seeing it. And remember that we're all human. And so across the board, there are going to be some similarities in intercultural interactions and the way we behave toward each other.